Hello, my name is Tomasz Oryński and I'm a freelance journalist based in Scotland. I am originally from Poland and obviously the main focus of my writing is Polish politics and social life. I am a regular columnist for a Czech language portal Britskie Listy. Occasionally I also write about haulage industry, recently obviously about the driver shortage in Britain, and you could see some of my pieces being recently published in, amongst others, West Country Voices. But apart from that, I'm also a host of a Polish language podcast called Lewackie Pitolenie. It is usually a light-hearted podcast in which we are having unscripted conversations on various topics, usually aiming at them from the left-wing point of view. You can hear an intro jingle to this podcast right now at the background. But recently, we have to drop our schedule and focus on the most important developments of the recent days. That is on the Russian invasion on Ukraine and the consequences for that that can be felt in Poland. I wanted to talk with people who feel the impact of that. And by that, I don't mean Ukrainian refugees, because I think they have much more important things on their heads now than speaking to some obscure Polish podcaster. But I wanted to speak with people who are dropping everything and run to help and bring some relief to all those refugees. And luckily for me as a podcaster, I haven't had much need to look for them because some of my closest friends and family members are involved in this great effort to help our neighbors. And when this podcast was published in Polish, we had a conversation with West Country Voices and we decided it may be worth to bring it also for an English language listener. And hence, this is the edited version in which you can hear the voiceovers and translations of the interviews I did. I had no troubles at all finding someone who is involved in those humanitarian efforts to help refugees because virtually everyone I know is doing something, is helping, is coordinating, is putting money or some donations into that. And my first guest is actually my co-host from Lewackie Pitolenie, Martyna Sokołowska. She is a local journalist from Sanok, which is a town at the eastern corner of Poland, very close to the border crossing with Ukraine in Krościenko. And she's that kind of the person that is always first to help. And so, also in this case, obviously, she and her friends rush to help. They are organizing some volunteers, coordinating their efforts. They are helping people at the border or those who are already in Poland and need some help to settle. But enough of me talking. The best thing now, I think, is just to listen to the conversation we recorded 2 days ago. Hi, what are you doing now?
Hi Tom. At the moment I'm having a little bit of a rest. But seriously, for a few days now, with a group of my friends, we have been very active. We are helping, or at least trying to, at the border. Everyone knows what is going on and how it looks. Everyone knows as well that so far, Poland is passing this test with flying colours. We are showing enormous solidarity. And I have to be honest, I haven't seen such a great mass mobilisation. And I am no stranger to charitable events. But I haven't seen a mass mobilisation of this scale. Such a wonderful participation by everyone. My phone is red hot all the time. I share communication duties with my friends, split contacts between us, and we are attempting to coordinate that effort on the go and keep our heads above water, as the flood of people willing to help is simply unbelievable.
Rękę na pulsie, ponieważ naprawdę jest tak dużo ludzi, którzy chcą pomagać, do nas dzwonią i piszą.
We are being called not only by local people, but from all over Poland and abroad. Everyone wants to support people fleeing war in Ukraine. We're receiving transports from Warsaw. People are collecting the most needed items outside the Polish parliament. Blankets, sleeping bags, things like that. Things that are the most needed now, as we have to remember it's still winter. It might be the end of February, but it is still cold. It's snowing here in the Bieszczady Mountains. And at the border, the situation on the Polish side, as I said, is under control. Poles are up to the task, and those people who cross the border are immediately taken care of. They are given hot drinks and food and are covered with blankets. On the Ukrainian side, we know there is no such help, at least here in Krościenko. I don't know how it looks at other border crossings, as I am local to here and this is where our relief efforts are
właśnie
directed.
z tą pomocą kierujemy i mamy już relacje osób, które przekraczają tą
We
granicę.
have relations of the people who cross the border. Today, just before this call, we came back from a hostel where another group of 3 women and 5 boys ended up. Those people were telling us how it looks to cross the border, and I have to say it is something unbelievably cruel and terrible compared to here, at our border. Those people are just standing for hours outside in the fields where there are no toilets, no places to warm oneself up, no relief points, nobody provides hot drinks or blankets. They are mostly mothers with small children, but there are also elderly people. We know there are tragic situations taking place there. Today, one of my friends, who is a paramedic, told me that there was a case of cardiac arrest. They resuscitated that person for 90 minutes. Luckily, they managed to save their life. But there are people with long-standing illnesses, like diabetics. Their sugar level is all over the place, and they have no meds with them, because those are people who just escaped from their homes as they were. They had no time to prepare.
Na to, aby przygotować się do tej ucieczki. No i o ile tak jak mówię, po polskiej stronie jest to coś niesamowitego, no i teraz pewnie też wszyscy
And as
są
I
tego
said,
świadkami,
on
oglądają
the
te
Polish
telewizyjne
side,
relacje.
the effort is amazing. And I guess many people watch it on TV and can see all those young people who come to us, to the border from all over Poland, to us here, to the border crossings in Medyka or Przemyśl. They are spontaneously self-organising, and with their own money, they buy bread, water, run around, give it to the people in need. And as I say, when it comes to the Polish side, it is something beautiful and amazing, that mass
Jeśli chodzi o
effort.
polską stronę, jest to coś niesamowitego, piękne, pospolite ruszenie.
No właśnie, nawet widziałem... I've even seen the appeal from Mayor of Przemyśl, who asks to stop sending donations, to stop coming, because they run out of storage space and those good-willing amateurs just get in the way of the relief efforts organized by the local government and the bigger NGOs. Is that the case for you as well? U was też jest tak samo?
Tak, u nas teraz jest podobnie.
Yes, it is similar here. Today, the mayor of Ustrzyki Dolna informed us that the warehouses are full and they are no longer accepting donations of things like clothes, meds or food. But there are still things that we can bring, and we do that. Basic things that we could combine into, as we call it, packages. These include water in small bottles, energy chocolate bars, baby food in sachets, blankets, thermal mugs and flasks. Because today, after these few hours, I don't know if that is a problem on the Ukrainian side. I guess the NGOs and relief efforts there are more concerned about places where the actual war is going on. They are needed there. But the Polish side is trying to do everything so the help is getting to those people who need it the most, to those queuing outside for 15 hours. But yes, in here we are also beginning to limit the flow of help. But we all know that is only temporary and that all those warehouses will be empty soon because more of those refugees are coming even here at our border.
Na naszej granicy, bo ja byłam kilka dni pod rząd, trzeciego dnia, drugiego dnia.
I have been at the border for the few days since the war on Ukraine began, and it was pretty quiet here in Kościenko. Usually this is a crossing where only vehicular access is allowed, but I don't remember, a day or two ago, they started to allow pedestrians to cross as well. So now the situation is different. Before it was just cars coming, driving through and continuing their journey to destinations further west. There were no crowds, like in Przemyśl or Medyka, as you could see on TV. But yesterday afternoon, I was there with my friend, and you could see that since pedestrian traffic has been allowed, there are far more people. Some locations are becoming totally jammed, and I don't know how it looks today, but yesterday there was one point, if I heard well, where a man was selling tea or coffee and some hot sausages to them. But here the efforts aren't organised in such a regular way as they have done it at those bigger crossings. That there are stands staffed by volunteers where everyone can approach and get water, a sandwich or a snack and get some refreshments after crossing the border. It is a bit different here. We distribute those packages, they get to people, but we think all the time what to do, how to get to the Ukrainian side and bring our help there.
To start helping people who are stranded over there, standing in the cold.
Yes, exactly. And you know what? On the first day, I was there for 3 hours, there in Kościenko. I spoke with the people who were waiting for their relatives. And as I say, I spent 3 hours there and I got so frozen that when I went back to my car, my hands were blue and completely stiff. And I thought to myself, I spent 3 hours here and I was moving. running around from one group to another, interviewing them. I was trying to learn how Ukraine is doing according to their relatives, what is going on there, how it looks through their eyes. And I simply can't imagine how those people now, at night, where there are not even street lights, are standing in several kilometre-long queues for hours during the snowfall, mums with small crying children, elderly people who cannot sit down. There are no toilets, there is no infrastructure there at all, and those people have to manage as they are.
On that topic, please tell me why there is that queue in there. Is it because Ukrainians don't let people out, or it's because Poles don't let people in fast enough?
No. I was watching the Polish border force. In my opinion, everything is fine. Of course, nobody let me into the actual crossing. It is not allowed. But we have signals from people who are crossing that there is some problem on the Ukrainian side, and I can't say exactly what it is. But the ladies I spoke to were telling me that they are holding up the traffic. I don't know why.
Nie wiem, czy złośliwie, czy z czego to wynika, no w każdym razie...
I've read somewhere in the news that the computer system on the Ukrainian side is down or had been hacked, I don't know, and they have to do everything manually and they don't want just to open the gates and let everyone through.
You know what? I hear different rumours. I saw myself how it looks at the border here in Kroszczenko. Today, a friend of mine came from Horchova, where they were transporting animals, as he's an activist for an animal welfare society, and they were engaged in transporting animals from the border and delivering pet food there. And I heard some utterly crazy stories, like that they don't let men through, as every man aged 18 to 60 is turned back to Ukraine, as they could be helpful in the war effort. And that friend told me that a guy was told by the border guard that if he were to give him $300, he would be let through. And he did it. He was obviously rich enough. He was driving a good car.
Ziemowit Szczerek, a writer and a reporter, also wrote something about it. He wrote that poor ladies are stuck in the queue and eye-wateringly expensive car with young guys behind the wheel just drive being waved through by the border officers.
Yes, I was reluctant to talk about it, as I haven't seen it with my own eyes. So I can't really talk about it, as I am just trying to speak about the things I see myself.
But now we have that confirmed from two independent sources.
Yes, and gosh, it's the 5th day of the war and people start thinking how to make money out of it. Some transport people, there are strange situations. They take people in their car and only demand money later. Or the ladies are standing for hours and the young boys in expensive rides just cross effortlessly because they bribed someone. We are getting signals that it's not all good on the Ukrainian side. Here, on the other side, there is no organisation that would help. I don't understand that either, although I understand they are mostly focused on the war effort now, in helping people that have bombs falling on them. But on the other hand, you know, it's the 21st century and people with small children having to stand outside for 20 hours while the snow is falling on them. Someone should at least try to organise something. I know it would be hard to organise help for thousands of people, but nobody seems to be even trying.
We have to make one thing clear here. You don't have any way to bring help from the Polish side. There are no NGOs able to go across to help people who are still on the other side, no?
You know what, we do try to do something. I've seen a recording of the mayor of Dolna. He drove across the border, but he just drove in his car. How many people, how much goods could he carry in it? We were trying to organise some regular way of helping, so there would be designated people or vans registered with border forces, so they know we go there for this very reason, to distribute our packages with sandwiches, chocolate bars, baby food, water, warm blankets. This is very important there. And we just wanted to get the van over there to distribute this amongst those people and go back. I don't know, we are going to keep trying. We know this is needed. But now we have to work in two directions at the same time. We're bringing that stuff to those points at the border, but more and more people are hosted in our town.
That was to be my next question. What percentage of people stay with you and how many of them just go further west?
It varies. On the first day when I spoke, there were people coming from all over Poland to pick up people from the border and take them back to their friends, families, etc. Then, when I spoke with people crossing the border, they were telling me they have a certain place to go, friends, relatives, and so on. But today we were with my friend at the hostel where there is a group of ladies with kids, and they were saying they have no idea what to do next. They crossed the border, but their kids have no papers, no passports. They are wondering how to sort it out so they can move ahead. There are people like that who get to those places here in the Podcar Parche department. We have so-called transit centres. People come here, get some sleep, rest, food, and then they go further to their families or to the centres that are established all over Poland where they can stay for good. And it's there where formalities will be arranged.
Oni już mogą mieć pobyt stały i tam mają to w jakiś sposób formalnie ogarniać.
No, z tego co widziałem, to nawet na dworcu. From what I saw, even at train station in Wrocław, which is 500 kilometers to the west, there's a point organized by the local government where the officials are helping people to legalize their stay, to start the asylum procedure. Rozpocząć tą procedurę.
Jeśli dobrze kojarzę, to nie wiem, czy nie poszła taka
If
dyskusja,
I remember
ale,
correctly, this is a government ordinance. Such points were to be organised in all major train stations. I have to be honest, I have been too busy to check national media today, as I was helping on the ground, and I had no time, and it is changing so rapidly that it's hard to keep track. But I heard that there were such points to be established at the train stations, and in our local point here there is also a government official who is helping with such things. So it's not like those people are just sent here and they have no idea what to do. Everyone is also given a leaflet in Ukrainian, Polish, I think in 4 different languages, with advice where to go, what to do, how to legalise one's stay. And there are different people here, apart from Ukrainians. We also have people from other countries who are fleeing Ukraine. Here in my hometown of Sanok, for example, we have a group of a few dozen people, students, from Somalia, Turkey, Afghanistan, who also crossed the border and who were directed to us here.
And those were students who were studying at the Ukrainian universities, yes?
Yes, and some have different procedures. I don't know the details, but a friend of mine, a border guard officer, told me that such people are directed to them and they just have to deal with them. They need to help everyone. It is not like it is only Ukrainians who are fleeing this war.
I saw in the British media some Sikh organization was alarming that a group of Sikh people are stranded at the Polish border and they are unable to cross, probably because of the color of the skin, and they were desperate to get in touch with someone who would see that they were allowed to cross. There's already some meme in circulating, perhaps you saw it, a scene from Family Guy where he's compared to the color chart and those white skins fall into the you're welcome category and those darker go into go and die in the forest category. Have you noticed something like that, or by now nobody cares about anyone's skin color?
Well, I haven't noticed anything like that. But to be frank, we have to remember that the things in Kroszczenko here are different than on those bigger crossings in Przemyśl or Medica. There are indeed TV stations from all over the world showing crowds of thousands sitting at bonfires at the borders. I haven't seen anything like that here yet. As I said, I haven't been on the border yet today, but yesterday we hadn't seen anything like that. I guess it might be because it used to be a vehicular crossing only, so the logistical infrastructure here is different. I guess if he had a chance to get across, we would see some dramatic scenes because, as I said, people with whom we spoke today shared some dramatic stories about elderly persons fainting because they can't endure that much. And no wonder, you were walking for hours fleeing war, you are fearing for your safety, your loved ones stay behind.
You said it yourself before. You are young, fit, and after 3 hours you had enough. It's hard to imagine how would you feel after 2 days' journey in such conditions with kids and elderly.
This is what I'm saying. I am full of admiration, and I am not surprised that Poles run in such numbers to help, as I can't imagine how one could stay indifferent. It's enough to sit down and chat for a minute, look into those people's eyes, and no more words are needed. I've stopped one car with girls and a small boy as I wanted to talk to them. They pulled over and they were talking with me with tears in their eyes. Irina, about whom I wrote on my Facebook, a young woman, a doctor, she left her husband behind, as he had to stay, and then she had to choose, stay behind with her husband and her elderly parents, who loved her so much, or grab her child and go into the unknown. where you will have separate lives. You don't know what's going to happen. You don't know if the place where your parents live will come under fire or not.
Mieszkają jej rodzice. Wiesz, to jest po prostu...
No to jest coś niewyobrażalnego. No i tak jak... It is something unimaginable. As I said, I can only watch it from afar through the lenses of social media, but I see extreme rights and leftists, while still calling each other names, join together in effort to bring some relief. I think there's a very low percentage of people who would be such great dicks that they won't be moved by this. Chujów, żeby to człowieka nie ruszyło, żeby nie ruszył na pomoc w takiej sytuacji.
No, widzisz, z drugiej strony masz procent...
But on the other side, you have a percentage of dicks, as you called them, who will now make money, who will abuse those poor people who are desperate to escape Ukraine and get to Poland or further west, as some people use Poland only for transit. Today I was captivated by one man. When I arrived at the hostel today with my friend to deliver food and warm clothes to those people hosted there, and some meds, we were welcomed by a security guy. So we asked him if someone is in charge. He said, "No, it's just me and them." I said, "Okay." And we started to chat, and this guy asked us how to deal with formalities, as he took 5 people into his own home, and there are small children amongst them who cough and have running noses after this march. And it was so beautiful. I thought to myself, I am not here to judge, but there are those people who go to the border to snap selfies, and there are those people who are unknown heroes of it all, like this security guy, who will be on duty there all night, and yet he took people from Ukraine into his own home, and he is still worried about how to help with their children who are sick, and he's worried as the children are not registered, they have no passports, if he can just take them to a surgery. You can feel the empathy, the deep interest in other people. He's not someone who just gives shelter, but he also wants to provide care for humans in need, and this is amazing.
Te osoby i to jest też takie...
No, oczywiście. I jeszcze też powiedzmy sobie szczerze, że jest to pewne ryzyko. And let's be honest, he's also taking a personal risk. COVID vaccination levels in Ukraine are very low. This can become a problem as well. But I think Poland will have to deal with this later. For now, please tell me, if someone wants to help, what one can do? Here in Scotland, people are already gathering donations. I was thinking about getting involved as well, but after speaking, amongst others, with you, I came to a conclusion that there's no point to haul all this stuff halfway across the continent, deal with all this stupid Brexit bureaucracy, imports, customs, border checks, and so on. It is much better just to work extra hours and donate that money. But is there anything else I can do? As you told me today, I am to sit tight on my money and you tell me when they are needed, as you have everything you need. Is that still the case? I czekać, aż się komuś przyda, bo na razie macie wszystko, co nam potrzeba.
Znaczy wiesz, wszystko co nam potrzeba. Tutaj są rzeczy, które
It's not like we have everything we need, but we can obtain it locally, and we still have donations flowing. Today, with our friends, we just came up spontaneously with a shopping spree, as we were thinking that we have so much of everything, but we gave it away in just one day, and more people are coming, and we do need that help, because those are people who come here just as they left home. Like some ladies told me today when I asked what clothes they need, they just pointed at themselves and told me, as I left home 2 days ago in those clothes, I still haven't had a chance to change. I have absolutely nothing. Of course, it makes no sense sending it from Scotland or Ireland, because we can source it all locally. But there are things that we will need. It is an armed conflict after all. There are already initiatives here where people are collecting medicines for the hospital in Lviv. We are collecting everything from bandages through medicines to other stuff. So, in my opinion, we need to react swiftly for the urgent needs for now. We need what is needed now and here. Those blankets for those people who are cold and other things, as I mentioned. We work on 2 levels now. So one thing is things for the border, but the other is that we have more people here in our region who will need other help, like clothes, food, basic things, even underpants. Those people have absolutely nothing. We have to get them back on track, to give them some beginning, so even if they continue their journey into Poland or further west, they can function on a basic level.
Funkcjonowanie na ten początek, no nie? Także moim zdaniem, wiesz, no...
To co możemy zrobić konkretnie? Okay, but what someone like me, who's sitting in Glasgow or in Edinburgh, can do to help? I can donate money to Polish humanitarian action or to all those big NGOs, but small-scale operations like yours also need our support. What you do is important. Those big NGOs, as you say, work in major centers, but you are here back in the sticks at the small border crossing. So what? I guess the best thing will be to observe your Facebook page and you'll write if you need something, yeah? Obserwują cię na Facebooku, jak coś będziesz potrzebować, to napiszesz, tak?
Po części tak.
To some extent, yes, but to some extent I have to say I have people who tell me, you are there, you know what you need. It varies from second to second. You see, for example, on those points, warehouses in Utriki Dolna, they no longer accept food or clothes. And I told you already, but for us, such basic items or clothes are still important, as we have kids of various ages here, women of various ages, people of various ages, and we will need all those things. But there are people who just send us money. They trust me enough just to send money to my private bank account. I go to shops and then send them receipts so they know what I use their money for, and I simply buy what I need in the moment. Tomorrow I go to the supermarket as well. We buy SIM cards, as those people have no way to contact their families. We buy small things like toiletries, soaps, toothbrushes, so money will always be needed. The big organisations will use them. Well, we, on our local level, have certain needs as well, and we know what to do and what is needed as we have direct contact with those particular people. We go into the hostel, speak to people, we ask them what they need. Do you have kids? What age? What shoe size? Etc. We'll get it for you. And so, while I don't think it makes any sense to send stuff like that from abroad, I think that warm blankets, sleeping bags, thermal mugs, flasks, we're going to need them. I think for a long, long time, as it is expected that a few million people will be forced to flee Ukraine. So it is not a matter of a few weeks and then those crowds will disappear. I'm afraid it will only get worse, and I fear that in time there might be bad things happening there. We already heard about cases of assault. A friend of mine told me, I haven't had a chance to confirm it, that they sent a girl across the border to deliver some help and she was stopped by some strange people. There was a dangerous situation. Generally speaking, I believe that we will have to face such difficult situations in the future. We need to coordinate our efforts and keep our finger on the pulse, and in my opinion, we need to be proactive to be able to direct that material help to the exact points where it is required. And this is what we are trying to do. We have established a network of people, everyone knows what they are supposed to do, and so far it is working.
Konkretne potrzeby, może tak.
No dobra, to jak będziemy mieli jakieś informacje... so if you need something, I guess you will let us know, and we will put that information out in our social media and everything. But for now, thank you for your time. I understand you are very tired and you are going to sleep straight away, but I guess you are back on the border tomorrow. Let us know about any new developments.
Oczywiście. Dziękuję bardzo wszystkim za zaangażowanie.
Of course, thank you everyone for your efforts and for all the help we receive.
Regular listeners to our podcast know Martyna's voice very well, and I believe, just like me, they could hear how tired she was on that day. No wonder, as for the few days already she and her friends were involved in providing help to refugees. They are in the avant-garde of the relief efforts. But I also wanted to see what is going on in other parts of Poland, as it's obviously not only at the border where Poles are getting together to provide help to our Ukrainian neighbors. And again, I haven't had to look too far to speak with someone, as my own mom got involved in helping refugees as well, so let's just hear from her. My mom, Anna Oryńska, is in Wrocław, western Poland. It's about 500 kilometers west from where Martyna is.
We have visitors from Ukraine in our house, 3 ladies and 2 teenagers. The ladies are related or from one family, as 2 are daughters-in-law, and then teenagers who have already been told by me that from tomorrow there will be no truancy, as I'm going to teach Polish to them. I'm a retired teacher.
Będą codziennie się uczyć języka polskiego. Jestem emerytowaną nauczycielką i wobec tego będę ich uczyć. Jak to się stało, że oni się...
How's it happened that they've landed here and at my neighbour's house upstairs? Well, when I heard what's going on at the train station, that the volunteers stand at the platform when the trains from Przemyśl or Lviv arrive, there were still trains from Lviv in the evening, and they hand up cards with offers of help to the windows. Later, a website was created where you could sign up with your offer for help, accommodation, transport, donations, meals, translation, medical help. Over 8,000 people engaged in that effort in just 2 days.
Pomoc medyczna. W krótkim czasie 8,000 osób w ciągu tych teraz 2 dni już tam się zaangażowało, zajrzało na tą stronę albo coś tam wpisało. Ja otworzyłam ten
I opened the
dział
accommodation
flegi
page and I
i
told them that we can
napisałam,
offer
że
accommodation, and as there's
dysponujemy
a small baby in our
noclegami,
family,
ponieważ
I imagined it would
małe
be best if
dziecko,
we can get someone with a small
wieloletnie,
child, so they won't be hosted in a school or a church or in a crowded open space, but here with us, where we have small tubs to wash a baby, and I purchased a load of tasty food
I
for the baby.
zgłosiłam i wyobraźcie sobie Państwo, że zaraz tego samego dnia zgłosiła się do mnie pani, że w drodze jest
And then on the same day, a
rodzina
lady
z
contacted
4
me telling me a
dzieci,
family with 4 kids
jadą
are en route.
samochodem,
They're
ale
driving their
też
car,
straszne
and because of
zapory.
traffic, they'll be trying to get here through Slovakia. I've been waiting for 24 hours until they told me that the father wasn't allowed to leave Ukraine as he was drafted, and the lady hasn't decided to undertake the journey with the 4 kids on her
Zdecydowała
own.
się kobieta sama z 4 dzieci, nie zdecydowała się przyjechać, więc to miejsce zostało zwolnione. Wobec tego jeszcze raz się
So I
wpisałam,
re-signed onto
że
that page with my
dysponuję
offer, and I've been waiting 2 days, during which people were still contacting me asking me for accommodation for refugees. But I had to say I'm already booked, and today, after many, many days, they finally arrived.
po wielu dniach przyjechali.
I asked what was the condition of the people who arrived.
Ojej,
Gosh,
wyczerpani.
they were
W ogóle to bardzo
exhausted.
ciekawa
It's
sprawa.
very interesting because there's a certain Mr. Alec who lives here since 2014. He already picked up some Polish customs. He kisses my hand when he greets me. He addresses me in the third person like Poles do, not in second person. He's very elegant. He's a car mechanic by trade, and he works here for many years, so he knows many people who are engaged in help for Ukrainians because they simply know him as a Ukrainian. So he jumped into his car and just drove to the border, and over a couple of days he drove 1,700 kilometers, shuttling people back and forward. But he only brought people who were recommended to him by some common contacts, people who were standing there already for hours or days waiting. Because there are many people who just go there with cardboard signs on which they write that they're offering free transport to Warsaw or something. But lone women with kids who just cross the border and see some random stranger offering them a lift often don't trust them enough to get into their car, and I do understand that.
Wobec tego on
So
tylko
he
te
only
osoby,
picks up
które
people recommended to
przez
him by
jakieś
their
rodziny,
friends or
przez
family.
znajomych mu polecili. Z tym, że ta rodzina, oni pochodzą spod Kijowa.
And so the family that stays
Mieszkają,
with
no i ta
us is
pani
from the
opowiadała,
outskirts of Kiev.
pani Nadia
As
to,
Ms. Nadia told me,
to
the
mieszkają.
airport that got bombed by Russians starts just across the street from their house. So they were one of the first to flee, just as the first bombs fell on that airport. So they got a minibus to Lviv, and there they were told at the city stadium that there's a refugee relief point. So they took a cab there to learn that it's empty. Probably it was only planned at this stage. Those women with all their luggage and kids were really desperate, so the taxi driver took pity on them and took them home. They stayed overnight there, sleeping on the floor. Next day they hired another cab and went to the border, and there they were queuing with the crowds for a day and a half, because, as Mr. Alec told me, they were first letting women with small children, then with the older ones, and the teenagers were the last to be allowed, although I'm not sure if that's true, if they could do such a triage, but that's what I'm told.
Tak opowiadali. No i w końcu tutaj dotarli, podano mi telefon do
Finally they arrived here.
Belka.
I was given Mr. Alec's phone number and he was given mine. They were still stuck in traffic on the motorway on the outskirts of Wrocław when they called me, so I put a pot of soup on the cooker and welcomed them with a warm meal. The volunteer lady who put us in touch called me to ask what we need, pillows or anything. She was saying that the Franciscan monastery in our town is full to the roof with donations. I told her I'd rather need some groceries, as I was expecting small children, so I'd bought a load of baby food and toiletries. Well, it won't go to waste. I can use it for my granddaughter. But it was Saturday and Sunday. Shops are closed on Sundays in Poland, and I hadn't enough food for adults at home. So she arrived with a packed car and brought me crates of cans, jars, breads, apples, various juices, bags of hygienic products. So with my sister-in-law, who lives upstairs, we decided to put it all in the garage that you can get to from inside the house. We placed a table there and stored all those things there for them so they can use it as their own pantry. Only cooked meats and stuff we placed in our fridges, so they know that this is theirs and they're not eating our food, so they won't feel bad and they can just use it when they want.
And what about people around you? Are people of Wrocław or your friends and family also engaged in helping refugees?
Słuchaj, ta tabelka, w której
See,
się
that
ludzie
list of people
wpisują
offering
na
accommodation when I signed up on that, I was number 50 something. And now when I check it, it's just endless and endless scrolling. And the volunteer lady who brought us that food, she was also preparing some flat that hasn't been occupied for a while, so she could put 8 people in it. She was also to deliver some pillows and other stuff here, and your brother Stack was to deliver for her, but someone else already did it by the time he got to it. So people are really keen to offer help. There's so many donations, and there's an army of people just needing to sort it, as everyone brings bags full of various goods, and you need to separate food, cans, sugar, rice, and so on.
Nawet dla
Even a
takich
10-year-old girl was helping eagerly.
10-letnia wolontariuszka nawet z radością bierze w tym udział. Natomiast w poniedziałek to już będą
On
w
Monday, there will
szkołach
be collections organised in schools as
zorganizowane.
well, although I fear today that the government wants to centralise it, to collect it in one big warehouse, sort it, and then send it out where it's needed. But some people, knowing our government, whose members are already accused of stealing money from charity organisations,
Po
are
pierwsze,
feeling
czy mają
uneasy
swoją
about
pełnić
it.
z plececzkami, to troszeczkę mają wątpliwości niektórzy.
And what people in town say about it all?
No tam problem jest tylko z tymi
There's a rumour about
studentami,
those students who are trying to escape Ukraine, students from Arabia and other exotic countries. So they stick out from the crowds of Slavic people. And I saw pictures of people beating or kicking them or abusing them. And even during the press conference of our interior minister, they were saying that we need to be careful so a wrong kind of refugee won't use it as a chance to sneak into Poland. I was also surprised that when my guests were telling me stories from the border, they were also talking with such disdain about those bloody Pakis who also wanted to get here, but we never let them in. And they seemed to be very happy about it. I even thought to myself that perhaps I should kick them out, as they're not the kind of people I would like to host under my roof, but I kept my mouth shut.
Zastanawiałam się, czy nie ich wyrzucić z mojego domu, ale nic nie powiedziałam. Także tam
So apparently there is some kind of
są
selection on
jakieś
the
taka
border
selekcja
of
jest
those who can
na
get here and
granicy.
who can't. I even heard a story about students from Egypt who are fleeing together with their Ukrainian friends, and yet some were allowed into Poland and some not. But I don't know how the case ended. I only know they had some problems crossing into Medica. But you know, the atmosphere in the town reminds me of those days of the Great Flood in 1997. Back then I was younger and I could help more, although your dad also says that if I was younger, I would also go to the border.
Gdybym był młodszy, to bym też pojechał na granicę. A wiesz, że Adam też
By the
przyjmuje
way, do you know
gości?
your older brother also takes refugees? He put them in this flat he recently inherited. And your cousin called us. She told us she's unable to take anyone, but as she's an actress in the musical theatre, she invites them to the show. As from the 1st of March, the COVID limits are relaxed, so even if the shows are sold out, there might still be some places. And she says even if that won't be possible, I'll put them with the light guys into their rooms. They've had some hard times, she says. They need something to take their minds off it.
Reżyserki ich zaprosi, żeby troszeczkę ich tak wyluzować. A ta pani Nina, co u mnie mieszka,
Nina, who stays with
jak
me,
się
asked
pani
me,
odwdzięczy?
how will I ever repay you for your kindness? I told her spring is coming. You can help me in my garden. She was laughing so hard. She was so happy. She said my garden is beautiful and she would be glad to help. We're trying not to make them feel embarrassed, especially that we can't predict how long they're to stay with us. So we want them to have some intimacy, to feel independent, so they don't feel like a burden to us. So they have their own rooms, they have their own food. In the kitchen, I gave them their own shelf in the fridge, and they can always join me for tea or coffee if I invite them. And if they want, they can always help me in the garden or something. I will also teach Polish to the children. I want them to learn at least some basics. I was surprised to learn they don't have any foreign languages in school. They don't even know the Latin alphabet. The girl's been to Poland before, but the boy has never been abroad, so it's all amazing for him. Strange signs everywhere. He's very excited.
To wszystko jest taki podekscytowany dzieciak. No ale jest codziennie pod pręgierzem są manifestacje.
Every day we have some protests in the market square. In our evangelical church, we have Erasmus students every year, and they were taking part. Spaniards, Ukrainians, Georgians, Germans, all with their national flags, went to the rally on Friday. And today, one of the guys from our church went to pick up a mother of one of those Ukrainian guys who tried to get here by train from Kharkov. She got stuck somewhere on the way, but she's already at the border, so they went to pick her up. It's always better if someone you know and trust picks you up. Those rallies in support of Ukraine are taking place every day. There's a load of Belarusians going there as well. There's a lot of them in Wrocław, and since those fraudulent elections, they come every Sunday to protest. And now they've joined the Ukrainians and expressed their outrage, how from within their borders shots are fired towards the Ukraine. There was also a Crimean Tatar speaking at those rallies. He lives in Wrocław. He said he's a Crimean Tatar, but he's Ukrainian as well, and this is their common homeland.
Ojczyzna. Także tak jak popatrzyłam na ten tłum, to większość tego tłumu to są młode dziewczyny. Natomiast
But as I looked at that crowd, majority of them are young girls. As for the men, I saw announcements like, our neighbour leaves his wife and children here and goes to fight. Can you help him to gather equipment, some military clothes, warm shoes, sleeping bags, flasks, torches and so on, because he needs to leave all his money to his wife and he needs to be ready for war. So the men are preparing to go and join the fight against the occupant. So this is what I can see around me. I also see people displaying ribbons in blue and yellow on my clothes. I'm not sure if they're Ukrainians or if it's just that everyone is Ukrainian these days and they want to express their solidarity.
Każdy teraz czuje się Ukraińcem, prawda, wyrażając solidarność w ten sposób.
The rallies are taking place at George Square, the main square of Glasgow as well, every day. And at the beautiful City Hall building that's located there, a Scottish flag has been replaced with the Ukrainian one. I visited it, and while there weren't any big crowds, we have to remember that someone is there all the time. From the morning till the night, someone stands there with banners and flags of Ukraine, but also Belarus. And I managed to briefly speak with one of the protesters. Okay, so you were here yesterday, and you are today, you'll be here tomorrow.
Yeah.
What people can do to help?
So we're here at least on the demonstration, to do whatever we can. So at least we stand here to support Ukraine. So there are also people who are doing charity. So for example, you can talk to these men. They're raising some funds, some money financing the army, for example, and even like the clothes also. So yeah. Also like the charities here as well.
And what do you make about British government still failing to allow refugees to come?
Well, I hope so, because right now what we have that all people in all parts of Ukraine are suffering from bombs. So no matter if that is Western Ukraine or Eastern, like most of the major cities are being bombed, and the number of refugees which is trying to enter Europe is kind of large. And of course, like it would be really helpful at least to maybe cancel the how it's called. So the visa requirement, at least that one.
Like Ireland did, or Poland, or everyone else, basically.
Yeah. So that would be really helpful, though.
And may I ask about you? You live here? You're a student?
I'm a student here in Strathclyde University. I'm studying the 4th year. I'm Ukrainian myself from Kiev, and my family is right now in Kiev. So.
Are they okay?
Yeah, thank you for asking.
This is, of course, terrible time for Ukraine. Russian army is causing so much harm to many Ukrainian families. This will be their great national tragedy. But I think despite all of this, we still have to remember about our Russian friends, because it is not that Russians support Putin. Well, of course some do, and screw those, but majority of Russians are decent, normal people just like us. We have to remember, this is not a democratic country. They had no say in any of that. This is a situation where the country is ruled by a mad despot, and this is a hard time for them as well. But I think my next guest will be a much better person to tell you about it. I'm here with Katia Apanova. Hi.
Hi.
Let me start boldly. When I told my friends I'm going to speak with you, they told me, why the hell you want to speak with a Russian? Who cares what Russian thinks when Ukrainian people are killed by Russian soldiers? But I'm not convinced that Russians and the Russian state is the same thing. So what would be your answer to this?
I have to say I completely understand why anyone would want to say that. I am so sorry that the Russian government decided to go to war. But in my opinion, one can tar everyone with the same brush because a large part of Russian society never voted for Putin. We just have to cope, unfortunately, with the conditions that are in Russia. But take note, there are plenty of protests. Loads of Russians are against this.
Well, that's great, but what is going to come out of it? Can you say that for Putin the biggest threat is really Russians? That they finally will stand up to him? On one side, we were observing that in Belarus, that people can fight the regime and yet they end up tortured, harassed, arrested, murdered, and so on. But this is really bad for the economy, for the international relations, and while Lukashenko can still count on Putin, on his support there, Putin in such a situation would have nobody to fall on. Will he survive if Russians will finally stand up to him?
Mu się wreszcie postawią?
Po pierwsze, ja nie myślę, że Rosjanie
First of all,
wreszcie
I don't think Russians will stand up to him. You know, he planned it for a long time, for many years, I think, and they were prepared for opposition, for sanctions. It was only us who were caught by surprise. And now you cannot even say you're going to protest. People were arrested in St. Petersburg, in Moscow, even in the small city I am from, Kaliningrad. There were arrests, and from what I heard, even if people go out for walks, that's what the euphemism is for it now, to go for a walk, without any banners, just go and walk and stand in a group in a public place, the police comes after them instantly. And if you dare to hold up some poster, the riot police instantly goes after you because you are a traitor. So this is what protesting looks like in Russia, unfortunately.
teraz wygląda jakby ten sprzeciw w Rosji. No niestety.
No właśnie, bo ludzie mówią, że tutaj...
Yeah, people say, look at those crowds in Europe, and in Russia there's nearly nothing. But we have to remember that to go out to protest in Russia requires much bigger balls than going out to protest in, say, Edinburgh, for example.
Edynburgu na przykład, prawda?
Tak. Jakby...
Yeah, exactly. I can go out and protest here in Klotsko, where I live. I can organise one myself, invite all friends, write slogans, wave them around, and there will be no consequences to me. In Russia, I'm not sure if I was brave enough because you can instantly be charged with terrorism or something even worse.
Od razu możesz dostać wyrzut terroryzmu albo czegoś jeszcze.
W takim razie powiedz mi, poza
So
tymi
tell me,
protestami,
apart from those protests, what Russians can do, what you do to help Ukraine?
pomóc Ukrainie.
Osobiście, no wiesz...
I have quite a few friends who are either here in Poland already or are somehow connected to Poland but are still in Ukraine. One of our employees is in Kiev and we want so much to bring his family here, but I'm not sure they will be brave enough to travel from Kiev to the border. But of course, if they will, we will go there to pick them up. I know many people organising some donations, buying the things that are needed, but we have also to remember that I'm seeing it from the point of view of a Russian who hasn't lived in Russia for 10 years. I live in Poland, and I have my bubble, and I'm surrounded by people with the same view as me. If I lived in Russia, I have no idea how it would look. There's terrible propaganda over there, and from what I see on Facebook, amongst those friends of mine from the times I still lived in Kaliningrad, the majority of them writes that they are against war, but some say it is good, especially that all the news in Russia is completely upside down. I even saw something about that it is Ukraine that attacked Russia, that Russia has to defend itself and so on. So it's really hard for me to tell what Russians think of it if they are deeply in Russia.
Jak są w Rosji, wiesz, tak głęboko.
No właśnie, no ja rozmawiałem z kimś w
I
Moskwie
do understand
i-
that. I spoke with someone in Moscow. I promise not to disclose with whom, but it was someone who lived in Poland for many, many years, and I was told that the propaganda is overwhelming, that if my eyes weren't opened by my contact with the West, I would believe it myself. And this is allegedly something completely beyond comparison even with the Polish government TV, especially that they are also trying to cut them away from Facebook.
Yes.
But majority of Russians are using Vkontakte more than Facebook. Am I right? They are in completely different bubble than
Bardziej
us.
w kontakcie niż z Facebooka na przykład, prawda? To jest zupełnie inna bańka.
Tak, tylko wiesz, w kontakcie
Yes,
też
but
zaczyna
on
być-
tech is beginning to be less popular. Now the majority seem to be using Instagram, and Instagram is very operative source. But Facebook and Instagram, one thing. If they cut access to Facebook, the Instagram will be gone as well. I think that in Russia, Telegram will become an independent
Rosji
social
takie
media.
zależne media będą teraz Telegramem.
To już moi znajomi...
Yeah,
właśnie-
some of my Russian friends already asked me to join Telegram because they were afraid to lose touch with me via WhatsApp or Messenger. But tell me, because I have to agree that what Russians face today is nothing compared to the Ukrainians, what they have to deal with. But I believe we have to remember that for you it is also a difficult time. I already saw some hate crimes against Russians, and from one hand, it's not like ordinary people are to blame, but from the other side, Putin is yours. It's you who did nothing to get rid of him for those 30 years, and now it's perhaps even too late for that.
Żeby się go pozbyć, a teraz może już jest za późno.
Tak. Powiem ci tak.
Yes,
że
let me
dzisiaj-
tell you, I was in Warsaw today, and for the first time I was feeling uneasy. I wanted to hide. Despite the fact that I have nothing to do with it, I did nothing wrong. as I was Katia Apanova on Monday. I'm the very same one now, perhaps a little more tired. But I was so ashamed, and indeed that's the feeling that, yes, there's many people who oppose Putin, but we all did nothing, and this one is on us. In Russia, I was working for the opposition media, and when the times became difficult, I decided to leave as this was an easier way. And I was asking myself, should I leave or should I stay and keep fighting? And back then I came to the conclusion that I simply can't do nothing, and I was probably right. But I can't say I was met with some hate. Yesterday, a few people wrote to me to say that they hate Russia and Russians, but I'm all right. I told them thank you for telling me that if you felt the need, but I removed them from my contacts. I don't know, I don't want to be friends with people like that. But I think now Russians have to focus on supporting each other, on supporting Ukraine, and thinking what things we can do to change things.
Co można zrobić?
But what can you do? Is there anything Russians can do? There are protests like in Tel Aviv where Russians burned their passports, but
No jest to bardzo mocno.
That is a very difficult question. At this point, I don't know. When I open media, I don't even know what to say. I simply don't believe this whole situation. When it happened, I was traveling, I had no internet, and only when I landed in Prague, I got connected and got a message from my husband who told me not to look at the news as there's nothing good.
W sensie nie wierzę.
But let's be clear. By I don't believe, you mean it's unbelievable what's going on, not that you believe in Russian propaganda.
Propagandzie, to
Oczywiście, ja rozumiem, że
Of course, I do understand what is going on. I just can't wrap my head around something like this could really happen nowadays. And now as I read Russian news, they're doing everything they want. They cut people's access to Facebook. They're reintroducing the death penalty. Medvedev mentioned it today. It's some kind of Taliban. Even worse, even Taliban asked them to end the war.
poprosił skończyć wojnę.
Tak, słyszałem.
So I heard. Is it possible that this invasion on Ukraine will be for Putin what invasion on Afghanistan was for the Soviet Union? That he will trip and fall over it? His allies, even China, already turned their backs on him. They are not so keen to support his actions anymore. Or is it the case that even if he fails to realize his plans, he will still be indestructible?
Nie do ruszenia.
Chciałabym w to wierzyć.
I would like to believe that this will be the end of Putin, but I think it is not so easy, and that it can be that even when I hope he will fail, it will be twisted in such a way to still show Russia as victorious. Because, you know, Russia needs to be victorious all the time. They need to celebrate that they're the best, the righteous, and so on. And in our history, we already have some wars we lost, and we don't even learn about them in schools.
To nie widzieliśmy.
No macie też parę...
You also have a few wars that you started and you don't know about it. Like when Putin mentioned in his speech how in 1941 Russia was fighting to end the war, but he somehow forgot to mention that it was Russia who, arm in arm with Hitler, started that war by invading Poland in 1939.
w ramię z Hitlerem.
No
prawda?
właśnie. Ale tutaj
Exactly. But this history will be twisted in such a way that Russians in 10 or 20 years will know nothing about it.
20 lat to już mogą nie dowiedzieć się o tej sytuacji.
Czyli myślisz nawet w tak...
So even in such long perspective, you still think that Putin or his regime will still be in power and nothing will change?
Nic się nie zmieni. No nie, ja teraz wiem, że...
Okay, I know it's hard for me to expect you to become some kind of a prophet, but you don't sound like someone having reasons to hope for a rapid changes in Russia.
Uzasadnioną nadzieję na szybkie
Ja w ogóle
zmiany.
nie mam nadziei, że w Rosji coś się
I have no hope at all for changes in Russia anytime soon. I think that it will be an isolated country in some way, and this is what they aim
w
for.
sensie. I oni do tego dążą.
Czyli wracamy do
So
tego,
we are back to what was happening during Cold
byliśmy w
War.
czasach zimnej wojny.
It's possible.
A powiedz mi jeszcze
Tell me
taką
one
rzecz.
more thing. You are from Kaliningrad. I never been there, but my friends were, and from what I heard from them, I imagine a dilapidated town, something like Poland was in early 1990s. Dodgy pavements, ruined buildings overgrowing with shrubs. Tell me, from the point of view of the ordinary Russian, what do you say about Russians willing to be proud for being the best in the world? Don't they feel a slight dissonance when they watch the news and then they got into their 30 years old Lada and drive on the road full of potholes to the nearby dilapidated town to get some groceries in some old, ugly shop? If they see all that, don't they feel that this country could be much better if instead of spending money on wars, they would use them on improving lives of the ordinary Russian
Na
citizens?
poprawienie życia zwyczajnym Rosjanom, to
Powiem ci
Skąd?
tak. że w Kaliningradzie
There are roads full of potholes in Kaliningrad, of course, like everywhere. There are some on Sicily as well, even worse. I know, I lived there for a while. In Kaliningrad, they rather drive 6-year-old Land Rovers, so they're not worried about potholes. So it is not that they are really, really poor.
Tam jest bieda.
No może w Kaliningradzie
Perhaps
nie,
not in Kaliningrad, but many places in Russia see people living like in the Middle Ages, in wooden sheds.
Tak, ja tam nigdy
drewniane
nie byłam.
chałupy.
Wiesz, ja byłam tylko... Wiesz,
I was never there. I was only in Moscow, St. Petersburg, and Kaliningrad. I haven't been to Russia a lot, indeed, but I'm asking myself the same question. Why Russia still feels the need to get up its knees every day, and why we spend so much for God knows what, for killing other people, and Russians still live as they lived. Even when they took Crimea in Kaliningrad, people were saying, I don't remember who exactly, that Russia has its new favourite baby now, and we are going to be screwed as we always were, and that it's not fair, as we also need some funds for development. We have our problems as well, and now Crimea will get all of this. People were jealous.
Wiesz, taka zazdrość troszkę.
A jeszcze taki dysonans.
But let's talk more about this dissonance. You live in Kaliningrad. When you hear your politicians saying that NATO soldiers near the Russian borders are unacceptable, but you in Kaliningrad are like the Russian aircraft carrier inside the EU. Those double standards don't bother people?
Zwraca uwagę, czy...
Nie, bo jak mieszkasz, jesteś zwykłą osobą.
Not really, because if you're an ordinary person in Kaliningrad, you don't feel it. All those military things are hidden in the forests.
No, ale
But you know they are there.
But this is not something you think about usually. You don't see the army. And now, as I live in Poland and I drive somewhere on the motorway, I see tanks being carried to some army base in central Poland. I can see it. Or when NATO soldiers are on leave, I can see them on the street. But this is also something. You know, perhaps I lived in my little world in which war does not exist anymore. We are modern people and we remember how bad it was. We will live in peace from now on, so I was never too concerned about it. But as you can see, every year brings us new surprises.
Co roku mamy nowe zaskoczenie.
No dobra, no to jeszcze...
Okay, so for one last question. If you were here together with my Ukrainian guest, what would you tell him?
Że jest mi bardzo przykro i że
that I am truly sorry, that I wish him from the bottom of my heart patience and peace, and so Putin finish those terrible things he does.
w końcu skończył to, bo to jest straszne.
To jest...
Now, for the tricky one that I have to ask. In that war, which side you are cheering for?
Słuchaj, to jest tak, że ja nikomu nie...
Listen, I cheer to no one. I just want it all to cease to exist. As I told you, I can't wrap my head around it. I can't wrap my head around the fact that today, Russian army, the Russians... But also, I don't differ between Ukrainians and Russians. For me, they are all ours. I live here abroad, and for me, Russian-speaking person is just Russian-speaking person. So for me, it is like a brother killing brother, and this is something disastrous.
Dla mnie to wygląda jak brat zabija brata. I to jest straszne, po prostu...
A czy to nie jest troszkę...
But isn't it in a way this imperial thinking? The whole Putin's propaganda is based on the claim that Ukrainians are not a separate nation, but they are just yours, same people as you.
No dla mnie nie.
Well, not for me. Half my family is in Ukraine, but I never thought about this, that this could be seen as imperial thinking. I do understand it's a separate country. It's just the people who live there are very similar to me, just like here in Poland, and we also speak the same language.
Rozmawiamy w tym samym języku.
No dobra, to dzięki.
Dziękuję ci bardzo.
Moim gościem była... Well, thank you. My guest was a Russian living in Poland for a decade, a journalist, Katia Apanova. I nearly finished working on this podcast, and at the moment of recording, which is Wednesday evening, 2nd of March, the things in Ukraine are not going as well as Putin hoped. I don't know if he believed in it or it was just his propaganda, but it looks like his vision was that the Russian army will steamroll across Ukraine and then delighted citizens of Novorussia will welcome it with flowers. But it turns out that Ukrainians are proving to him very strongly that they are a proud nation ready to spill blood in defense of their independence, and his military progress is not as good as he hoped. The experts say that the logistical chain of his army was not prepared for such prolonged fights, And we can see some nervous moves from Putin. Here he proposes some negotiations, there he threatens the world with nuclear war. I think we can at this moment talk about hope for Ukrainians, because on the other hand they are finally recognized by the people on the West as well, who no longer treat it as some barely existing wild Eastern European country. Nowadays Ukraine gets finally all this support from the West, the EU, the NATO, the help it was longing for so many years and that the West failed to provide in the year of despair when they were invaded by Putin forces back in 2014. And over all those years since when the Crimea Peninsula and eastern Ukraine were occupied by the Putin forces. I wish Ukraine all the best, and I think it will end good for them. Putin will be defeated, and even if it won't be the end of him, it will be the moment he got his wrist slapped, and it will, I think, bring some serious changes both in Russia and in the international politics. But while I speak with those Ukrainians protesting at the George Square in Glasgow, I could see a lot of hope amongst them. They were browsing Twitter for the newest reports from the front line, they were cheering for some messages of support coming from Western leaders, but my conversation with Katia made me sad. She made impression of someone who lost all the hope that things in Russia can change to better. I can't say much, the events are still unfolding, I don't dare to make any predictions. But I wish Ukrainians that it will go all the best for them and for all their hopes to be fulfilled. And as for Katia, I wish for her to be wrong, that also in Russia the wind of change that we in Poland were lucky to feel in 1989 could also be finally felt. And when it comes to us, Poles, my heart is growing to see how we overcame our divisions and work together to help our neighbors. I wish that this national solidarity could stay with us for longer, so even when the situation in Ukraine gets back to normal, we won't get drawn back into those ruts of the mutual hate, lack of trust and national divisions. But this is still long ahead of us, and at this moment Russian bombs are shelling Ukrainian cities. Therefore, let's just get our sleeves up, donate money to charities helping refugees. Those who can help on the ground, please do. Those who cannot, because they live abroad, please become advocate of Ukraine amongst the inhabitants of the country, just as I try to bring to Britons following me on Twitter the side of the things that they cannot see in the British media. Let's keep the fingers crossed, and who knows, perhaps as I already saw people writing online, we will soon be able to support free Ukraine by going for holidays to this beautiful country, to see Kiev, Kharkov, Lvov, and perhaps even Crimea. And this is what I really wish to them and to all of us. This was a joint production of Lewackie Pitolenie and West Country Voices. You were tormented with terrible accent of Tomasz Oryński. Additional voices: Martyna, Kim Parker, Anna, Anthea Simmons, Katia, Katrina Best. Edited by Tomasz Oryński. Music by Artur Lesicki. For more, see westcountryvoices.co.uk and oryński.eu. That's ORYNSKI.eu.